So in planning, one of the things, well, and actually in the charter and planning and executing and controlling your project, integration management becomes the key. That's who you are. You are the master integrator, which is why you want to use a RACI chart, which is why we say that, for all of the things you have to do, 90% of what a project manager does is communication, because all of these things have to be coordinated. And so integration management becomes the way that you manage and control all of the processes that drive your 10 knowledge areas and your 49 processes that make up project management. It is multidisciplinary. It's why in week 2 we were having the conversation, are you a generalist or are you a specialist, or are you both? Are you a specialist who's now a manager or a leader? I hope you enjoyed that conversation. That is part of the heart of integration management. And you're going to manage all of this work by phases and phase gates. So for each project, you'll develop your phases. It might be a strategy phase, then a design phase, and then a build phase, and a test phase, and a rollout phase, right? Whatever you want to call it. And at the end of each phase, you'll do a phase gate, which is, did I complete all of my requirements enough that I can move on? It's a phase gate. It's a go, no-go decision. Yes, no. If you aren't ready to go on to the next phase, we want to be honest, and we want to address why and go back and fix it before we move on. So the phase gates are those interim deliverables leading to your final deliverable along the way. You do a phase gate. And so part of that is a way of controlling risk, right? So risk management becomes central. In fact, this whole approach to project management is risk driven. It's about managing risk on your projects. Remember, a project by definition is unique in its deliverable, which means it's never been done. It's going to have risk, and it's why many projects just fail. And so projects are risky. The definition of a risk, the simplest definition, is the single word: it's an uncertainty. We don't know if it'll happen. And a risk isn't just negative, right? We think of risks in terms of threats. It's true. But risks can also be opportunities to advance or accelerate forward. And we want to create opportunities. We want to mitigate or eliminate risks along the way. And so you'll have a risk manager that works for you. You'll collect your risks. Just like the stakeholders were in a stakeholder register, which is just a list of stakeholders, you're going to create a risk register, which is a list of risks that will impact your project along the way. And then as part of that, so you'll do your risk management planning. And whenever I do management planning, that tells me how in detail I'm going to do the other processes that fall under it, including risk identification, qualitative and quantitative analysis, risk response planning, monitoring and controlling, and I would also say response. There's response planning. Perfect. And so whenever I have management planning, I'm planning how I'm going to do in detail all these other processes. So there's 7 processes here that you have to manage just in risk alone. Okay? And so in risk management planning, it's the how I'm going to manage risk. I'm going to define my qualitative and quantitative approach up front. I'm going to define my contingency reserves, my money I can set aside to address these risks. I'm going to create a matrix that prioritizes the risks. I'm going to nominate risk owners, these sort of things. And so with risks, they can fall into general categories listed here and described further in the reading. Now in risk identification, there are lots of ways I can figure out risks. One is a SWOT analysis. That's usually a quad, doesn't have to be, that defines strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats on your project. And of course, notice I said opportunities and threats, right? So a risk is an uncertainty, and it's both an opportunity and a threat. One of the ways that I collect risks is doing the Delphi method. And the Delphi method is a clever way. So what we found is that by research, experts tend to hide their opinion when in a group. Now, yes, there's always your type A personality that's real aggressive. There are a couple of those, and they will dominate. Most of us won't express an alternative opinion because we don't want to be laughed at or ridiculed, or maybe we don't have our data with us. And so the Delphi method is a way of asking in a questionnaire that guarantees anonymity. And experts are more willing to give us their opinion. And then what I do is I collect all these inputs from the different specialists, and then I send it back out to them to affirm what I think are my collected results. That's the Delphi method along the way. Then I'll do qualitative risk analysis. And the whole point to qualitative is just to take that risk register, that list of risks that I just developed, and put it in an order that's a priority. So I'm kind of shaking up the order because some things are more important than others. And this qualitative analysis is the approach that I can prioritize. And I'll use a risk matrix. Let's just look at one, see what that looks like. So here's a risk matrix where every risk, whether it's positive or negative, whether it's an opportunity or threat, has the probability, what's the chance that it might happen, or the likelihood, and the impact, right? What is the damage or the glory if it happens, right? What's the goodness on my project? And so I will weigh each individual risk in my risk register. Every one will go through qualitative analysis, and I'll define its priority based on that and reorder the list. I will also use risk categories to help me. So the nice thing about risk categories is they let me group like risks together, and sometimes I can use the same risk response for each of the categories. So if my risk category is, if I'm building a house and my risk category is water, water would cover water leaks, water from a torrential storm, water from a hurricane, right? I can group like responses. I can group responses to like categories in a large part, right? It helps me. Now, once I've reprioritized my risk register using qualitative analysis, for the very top risks with the highest probability and the highest impact, I'm probably going to do quantitative analysis, which means I'm going to get more detailed. I'm going to collect market research, right? So qualitative analysis was really based on, it's called subjective. It's based on expert judgment, but it's a best guess, which is usually pretty good. It's good enough to rank order them. But now, for those final heavy hitter risks, I want to do quantitative analysis, where I'm going to go out and I'm going to get market research to support my decisions, traffic flows and other things that will help me really identify what contingency reserves, what money I need to set aside to manage these, right? And so the book walks through a failure mode and effect analysis. I thought they did a good job. So I would say refer to the literature on that aspect. And they also did a nice FEMA example. Now, one of the things that they'll do in risk management is do expected monetary value using a decision tree. So this is a decision tree. I think we've talked about this before, where it looks like a tree on its side, like it's fell down, right? And so you have this tree structure. And what you have is your steps along the way and the probability and impact of each. And so what you do is once you lay out your pattern of steps, then you add probability and impact for each and work backwards, multiplying to see which decision. So you're using expected monetary value, which is probability times impact, in the form of a decision tree. And once you've defined your decision tree, then you do the numbers, adding probability impact, and multiply them back to see which decision you should make. That's how that would work. Remember I said risk, by its shortest definition, is an uncertainty, and it can come in two types, threats or opportunities. So what this slide is telling you is that there are common responses to a threat, which is to avoid, transfer, mitigate, or accept. And there are common responses to an opportunity, a risk that's an opportunity. You can exploit it, share it, enhance it, or just accept it. And those are well defined in the book and online. So I'd ask you to look there. And then, of course, we're project management. We are all about control. So monitoring and controlling. When I say monitor and control, watch for triggers. Look for triggers along the way. Things that are indicating the risk is coming. So if I'm building a house in South Carolina in August, right, what are going to be my triggers, my indication that risk is on its way like a hurricane? Well, I might get a forecast 2 weeks out that says a tropical storm has formed. Then a week out, I might get a path that shows it in some coming across my construction area, right? These are triggers that we want to watch out for. And then, of course, make sure our response is appropriate, that we execute the response, contingency response that we planned back in quantitative analysis, and that we update our register along the way. Okay, that's it. That was fun, chapters 5 and 6. Let's have fun this week, and I will see you online.